All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening. We are so grateful for those who are joining us, and we're giving folks a chance to come on in. We welcome you all, and we appreciate you all for joining us this evening for our second youth led collective learning discussion. Hopefully, you all were able to join us yesterday as well. If not, you can catch that recording on our social media platforms. They'll be posted very soon. I want to start off by introducing myself. My name is Candace Hill, and I am a Michigan Education Policy Fellow working with 313 Reads. And over the past several months, I've been fortunate enough to work with the Youth Literacy Justice Advisory Council. We're going to talk more about the Youth Advisory Council in just a moment, but first, let's make sure that everyone knows what kind of work 313 Reads does. Um, for those who are not familiar, 313 Reads is a coalition that mobilizes efforts across organizations to impact literacy equity in Detroit. At 313 Reads, we believe that literacy is access and opportunity, literacy is equity and justice, and literacy is liberation, right? So that's exactly why we put on discussions like the one that we're having tonight, because we know that these conversations help bring learning and awareness to our community. And so let's talk a little bit more about what the YAC is. When you hear us talk about or refer to YAC, we're talking about the Youth Literacy Justice Advisory Council. Um, and the YAC consists of young leaders who are passionate about literacy. They joined this council because they have an interest in helping community members build even better youth literacy programming. So our one of our guests and our lead, Khai Shahid, she is a part of the YAC. She has this passion for literacy, as you're going to see tonight. And so this purpose of helping the community with building better youth literacy programming is exactly why we're hosting this conversation tonight. These discussions are an opportunity for our youth to lead by sharing their knowledge and perspective with the community. This collective learning empowers our youth to be our teachers by helping us to think more critically about youth literacy and to even consider some ways that we can strengthen our approach to literacy. So, our YAC member who is being spotlighted tonight is Khai Shahid. She and her mother, Dr. Rosalyn Shahid, will be our presenters this evening. They will introduce themselves, but I do want to give you a few tidbits about them. Khai is a seventh grader, and she's a part of the National Junior Honor Society. One of her recent honors was that she was selected as one of the Michigan Reading Association's 30 under 30. That is like such a great honor. Kudos to Khai for that. And she was given that honor for being a disruptor in the field of literacy. As for Dr. Rosalyn Shahid, she is a literacy consultant, an adjunct instructor, and a social justice advocate. Dr. Shahid is a native Detroiter who received her bachelor's from the University of Michigan, a Master of Education in Reading from Marygrove College, and a PhD in Reading and Language Arts from Oakland University. Very thankful to have them both with us this evening. And before I give the floor over to them, I do want to emphasize that tonight's gathering is meant to be a conversation. We want everyone to feel free to put your thoughts, comments, questions in the chat as our presenters go along. We will do our best to elevate comments as they come in. And also, we'll have some time throughout and at the end for Q&A. So feel free to be engaged and interactive as we go along. And with all of that being said, I will move out of the way and hand the mic over to Khai and Dr. Shahid.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Miss Hill, and congratulations on your fellowship. That sounds beautiful. I am Rosalind Shahid. I am the mother of my beautiful co-host this evening, co-facilitator Khai Shahid and Kareem Shahid. I am a wife, teacher, literacy advocate. I lean very heavily towards social justice, right, in my work. I am a lover of books. I'm a lover of Black art. And thanks to my husband, Dr. Hakeem Shahid, I am now an emerging Marvel fan.
My name is Khai Shahid. I'm a daughter, student, learner, sister, musician, and I play in my band at school. I'm a social butterfly and a lover of books along with school.
And my mentor, Dr. Vivian Johnson, always shared with me to always start with what you love. And Kai, we love what?
Books.
We love books. So we're going to center books this evening. But first, Kai's going to talk about our plan for this evening.
So, right now we're doing our welcoming and gathering in. Then we're going to define book banning and who it affects. After that, we're going to raise awareness and talk about advocacy. Then, last but not least, we're going to center the community doing a Q&A. So for these next couple slides, I'm going to share some of our favorite books. And when you see the image, I want you to drop in the chat any connections that you're making. Do you recognize this book? How does it make you feel when you see the image? Those types of things. So while you're doing that, I'm going to give you a small little introduction of this book. So, Carter Eats a Newspaper is a book that tells the story of Carter G. Woodson, who was the father of Black History Month. He was born to two formerly enslaved people 10 years after the end of the Civil War. Though his father could not read, he believed in being an informed citizen. So, Carter read the newspaper to him every day. Through his reading and research, his interest of histories and Black people was deepened. This is his journey of transforming the way people thought about the history and the contributions of Black Americans. And here's a picture right there. So, Mommy, would you like to, did you see any comments in the chat?
It's a great book. I also just want to add, I love this book. It's one of my favorite books. It was introduced to me. I hope she's on the line tonight by Dr. Ashlyn Curry. It really centers the childhood of Carter G. Woodson. I'm actually reading right now Fugitive Pedagogy, which is an excellent book, which centers the life and really kind of abolitionist teaching that Carter G. Woodson did. So it's just a way to kind of anchor ourselves to know more about Dr. Woodson.
Okay, great. So our next book is The Proudest Blue. This book is about Itibash Muhammad, who was a fencer and the first American woman in a hijab to compete for the United States in the Olympic Games. This book tells her story of her childhood, where she learned to be proud of her cultural heritage, values, and her beliefs where she finds her strength. Now, here's a little quote if you'd like to read that, Mommy, while I show the picture of Itibash Muhammad.
Yes, I've fallen in love with this book. It's so beautiful. The images are beautiful. I love just centering a somewhat untold story, right? Sometimes we don't hear about the stories of peoples who have different belief systems and different religions. And so, one of my favorite quotes from this book is stated by the mother. I'm in love with the mother in the book. And she says, "Don't carry around hurtful words that others say. Drop them. They are not yours to keep. They belong only to those who said them." Thank you. It is a beautiful illustration. I see that popping up. Thank you for that.
Okay, our next book is Hair Love by Matthew A. Cherry. This book is about a little girl who struggles to style her naturally curly hair. When her dad realizes what his daughter is experiencing, and despite his doubts about his abilities, he immediately steps in to give his child a hand. After some trial and error and some help from a video, the pair manages to get the girl's hair in a row of 3 cute buns on top of her head. The story concludes with the father and child visiting the mother, who is a cancer patient. The ending reveals how hairstyles can be a point of beauty, pride, and connection for Black girls and women. And the little picture that we have up here says Black women and breast cancer, why disparities persist and how to end them. So if you have any comments, Mommy, if you'd like to read them.
Um, so we have Mark Moore who says, I need this one for one of my students. Absolutely. It is a beautiful book. Hair Love is one of my absolute favorite books, and I love the short film too. Yes, absolutely. And I believe it won an award for best feature film because it's considered kind of a feature film. It's a beautiful text, but I love the fact that it really kind of centers women, right? We know that Black women die disproportionately from breast cancer. So this is also supports young women to understand uh, that cancer exists, what they can, it starts conversations with what you can do about that, understanding your body, even as a young person, right?
Yep. Now,
Eh,
this next, oh, would you like to continue?
yes, we're seeing lots of people love this
Okay.
book.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, but our next slide right here is different types of books that we've read, and maybe you notice them. If you do, say the ones that you like and what you like about them. So I'm gonna go ahead and name a book that I've read before and really fallen in love with, which is Brown Girl Dreaming. It's a memoir written in verse that shares Jacqueline Woodson's childhood as a black girl from the South who fell in love with writing. I just really love that storyline. I read it with my mom and with the author, and it was along with the author on a Facebook Live just like this one. And I read it in class, and that was just really fun. So, Mommy, what's your book from here?
Well, I'm going to have to go ahead and center the 1619 Project. Nicole Hannah Jones. I think of her as she's my friend in my head. She is just phenomenal. She really centers the lives of Black Americans, and her work has gained national recognition. Um, Her work really poses a question for researchers, right? And it repositions how we think about the founding of America from, oftentimes we'll hear this date, 1776 or even 1620, when the Mayflower landed here. But she said, what if we started that day at 1619, right? When the first ship of enslaved folks arrived here, were forced here in the Americas. So she poses that that's how she starts her text, and it repositions how we think about history. So it's just a beautiful book to have as part of our collection. Some other folks are naming The Bluest Eye, The Hate You Give are those are two of the favorites. Yes, thank you, Miss Irby. See you, Invisible Man. Thank you. Yes, that is also one of my favorites. Beautiful. We can go to the yes, yes. The Hate You Give and The Bluest Eye are great connections to the real world. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Okay. Now, all these books that I've named so far have one thing in common. They've all been banned. Now, what is a banned book? A banned book is a book or material that has been removed from circulation in public spaces like libraries, classrooms, and other public domains. When a book is banned, it restricts access to the book based on the point of view of an individual or a group. So, Mom, if you'd like to talk a little bit on the history of banned books.
Yes, thank you, Kai. Unfortunately, this idea of banning books is not a new phenomenon. Really, throughout history, books have been banned. They've been burned. They've been buried. And really, when you think about it and you look across time, the goal behind the banning, the goal behind the burning of books is really to restrict access and knowledge, right? And I stated earlier, as part of my positioning as an educator is to be a social justice advocate. So this is one of the domains that I work in as a literacy consultant. And I just wanted to share just a few highlights throughout history. So if we go way back to 48 BC, we see that the Library of Alexandria, which was located in Egypt, was actually known as one of the world's greatest archives of knowledge. It was actually also not just the archive of knowledge as a library, but it was home to hundreds of scholars representing nations from all over the world: Egypt, Greece, Ethiopia. So when this library was burned, um, it not only destroyed books, it destroyed community, it destroyed partnerships, right? It destroyed humanity, right? How people were connecting across geographic locations. Um, I would be also remiss not to mention the direct banning of books from my ancestors, African Americans. Uh, from the moment that they arrived here on slave ships and kidnapped from their land, they were denied access to their language, their culture, and yes, the right to read, right? Um, so we really have to think about this idea of denying access as a political act, right? And if you look in the 1930s, you'll see probably one of the most famous cases of book burning happened in Nazi Germany, um, where books were burned and destroyed that were considered un-German. Uh, this was propaganda to push false narratives about our Jewish brothers and sisters, and to deny access to perspectives that refuted their own, right? In the 1970s, even. Um, I put the book, The Feminine Mystique. Many of you are probably familiar with that book. It was actually banned and challenged because it challenged the status quo related to gender equality. It's just that idea of men and women should be paid fairly, should be paid equally. Women should have access to own their own homes, their own cars, credit cards, by the way. So it really was kind of challenging the status quo. And so, again, today we see this happening right now in 2024. This year alone, or 2023, over 1,100 books have been challenged. And you might ask why. Why do you think, Kai?
Because of access to knowledge.
Access to knowledge. Absolutely. So Kai's going to talk a little bit about that data.
Is it okay if I ask one question? I'm
Sure.
wondering, as you look at the types of books that are currently being challenged and the authors, um, are are there any particular groups of people that are particularly being affected by this, or particularly being silenced, would you say?
Yes, there are. And Kai is such a great question, and it's very timely because Kai's next slide talks exactly about that question. So go ahead, Kai.
Okay, let me just go to this next slide here. So it says that 26% of books banned address LGBTQ plus topics, and 30% of books that are banned discuss race or racism. Now, on this little graph, we can see that it says the unparalleled number of reported book challenges in 2022 nearly doubled the reported in 2021. The number of unique titles targeted marked a 38% increase over 2021. So in 2003, it was only 305, then went up a little in 2012, and a little lower in 2020. But then once we hit 2021 and 2022, that's when our numbers are reaching the thousands. So we have another infographic here, which is the
Before you
diversity.
go,
Oh,
Before you go to that infographic, I do have a question for you because I was just noticing the years here. It starts at 2003. And Kai was born in 2011, right?
yes.
So, how does it make you feel to see, like, these are your formative years, right? To
Yeah.
see so many books being challenged now that you're of age to start reading some of these texts that we mentioned earlier.
I feel like I'm sad because people like me that love to read and stuff won't be able to always see themselves in what they read, and it's always going to be like a certain group of people that they'll see and not themselves. Like if I'm reading because right now I'm reading the Twilight series, and there's only a few characters that are not white and stuff, and it's you can read it, but you don't usually see yourselves in the books in classrooms or in like the books that you might read on a daily basis, like I'm reading the Twilight series. And a lot of the students aren't gonna go and look for books that they will see themselves in. They're probably looking what they have.
Beautiful, thank you. Miss Hill, how would you respond to that looking at this graphic?
Yeah, so it really is shocking to see the large jump
Mm,
from one end of the graph to the next. And one of the things I appreciate that Khai just brought up was the fact that, you think about as a student in your classroom and the books that you're able to read as a part of your curriculum, you want to be able to see people who look like you in books and topics that connect with you. And if either of you could speak more to that, as I know we have educators who are a part of this live right now who are watching. If you have any thoughts for educators as they think about, providing the best opportunities for their students when it comes to literacy that is diverse.
yeah, I'm going to go back to what Dr. Johnson said, and what I parroted this evening really is providing spaces for kids to feel joyful in your classroom. And it's really hard to feel joyful when you don't feel included, right? So I think we have to have intentionality around it. So one of the things that I always recommend is just take a look, right? Take a look at your current library and ask yourself, would this be, in the words of Rudine Sims Bishop, would this be a mirror, window, or sliding glass door for my most vulnerable student, right? My student who maybe doesn't fall in love with reading, and for those who do. So, how many opportunities have I provided for images to reflect not just images, but the social issues, the um, the identities, right? The histories, the language. We have Dr. Jones on the call tonight, and she also does work about just like home environments, right? So just, all of these pieces are so important for kids to see themselves reflected back, and also opportunities to, expand beyond what they know.
That
So that
that's
would be
That's really great. I wanted to highlight for Khai, right? We were started this off talking about how these conversations are helping to better educate the community. And Khai, I wanted to highlight this comment that's on the screen right now. Sounds like we're hearing from a parent who is saying that the things that you're talking about with your mom tonight is making her want to be mindful of having scholarly texts be accessible for all youth that she interacts with, but even for her own children. And I think that's a really great point that even for parents, we were just speaking to educators, but even for parents, there are ways that, parents can be mindful of the books that their children are being able to have access to.
absolutely. Okay, Kai, if you want to go to the next slide.
Okay. So here's an infographic about the diversity in children's books in 2018. So before I talk about this, I just want to give the chat a moment to tell what they see when they look at this and if they've seen it before. So if you'd like to highlight any comments that you see, Mommy, you can go ahead.
Let's give people a moment to kind of look at it. And although this infographic is um, looks at the publishing of books and from 2018, we can certainly say that many of these statistics are still true. Um, so go ahead, Kai. What do you notice about this infographic?
Well, when I first look at it, you can see that there's 50% white books that were published in 2018 for children. And when this little boy's looking in a dozen mirrors, he has a disco ball, but in all these mirrors, he can see himself in different ways. So in the first one, he's a normal little boy with a dog. Then he's an astronaut, a king, a fireman, all these things. But then when you go to 27%, those are all animals or other non-human things, which the animal, the little bear, has a nice little, like a nice full body mirror. Then when you go to 10% of the books published about by African or about African or African American people, there's a smaller mirror, maybe about half the size that the bear gets. And it's cracked mirror, so that means it's distorted image of the little girl. Then 7% is Asian Pacific or Islander or Asian Pacific American people, where there's an even smaller mirror, and it's still an even more distorted image, and part of it was broken off. 5% were Latinx, where the little girl is holding a handheld mirror, but you can only really see her face. Then 1% was American Indians and First Nations, where the boy's mirror is so small that he can only really see his eye in it, and he can only take up the palm of his hand, which shows the difference between 50% and 1%, or even 50% and 10 or 7 or like 10 or 7%. And that's really disturbing when you think about what these children were reading when children are younger, they do want to see themselves in these books. But when they're not published or they're or they just can't be published, then they can't see it. And when people can see themselves in books, especially kids, it supports their self-esteem, love of books, and their likelihood to want to read more often about topics that are new or interesting to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the members in the chat says, yes, I've seen this infographic before, and it still amazes me that there are more characters that are animals than than people of color, right? And so we have to be vigilant, right? And talking to our publishing companies, buying books from publishers who center BIPOC communities, because there are some. Lee and Low Books is one that comes to mind. The Brown Bookshelf is another publishing company that comes to mind, right? So when we start to support those book publishers, it actually supports our case, right? I noticed the cracked mirror, distorted image, and the small mirrors, and the minute representation. Yes, absolutely. The infographic leaves out specific cultures and does not even address the population who have autism. Yes, yes, that is such an excellent point. We have so much work to do with disability justice, right? Khai is amazing. Her clarity of purpose, vision, and understanding are so on point. Thank you, Dr. Waters. And Dr. Curry writes in, just us books. Yes, thank you, Dr. Curry. Just us books. The sad reality of how underrepresented our African Americans are in the publishing realm, and even more with Black males. So how do our young males get to see themselves show up in books at a higher rate? This will pique their interest if it is culturally relevant. If it doesn't apply to me at young ages, how likely is it going to matter or connect for me? Beautiful, beautiful. Any comments, Kai or Miss Hill?
No, but I think you got all of them. That I think those are all very, very good comments, and I love seeing how you guys were connecting to us in the chat.
Yes,
Yeah,
great comments. One of the things that stood out to me, especially in this last comment here, is, when we think about, excuse me, how do we get our young people more interested in reading? How do we build their literacy skills? That one role that we should really focus more on is helping our students be more interested by allowing them to connect more with what they're reading. And that's what this last comment here highlights. When we look at our population of students and demographics who tend to struggle with literacy, as you compare what groups of people, have lower literacy rates, I would say you begin to see some of these connections between who's being more represented in books, what books our students are seeing in front of them on a regular basis, and who tends to have those stronger literacy skills.
Absolutely. And just to connect back to the last infographic that we saw, that data piece, right? So it becomes, when you look at only 10%, 7%, 1%, right? It feels even more disturbing, right? When we see that the books that are being censored disproportionately are censoring BIPOC authors, books that center race and racism, books that center the LGBTQ plus communities, right? So we see that there's a disproportionality there. And what we want to do, we want to elevate and raise awareness around it, because this is a really, really important topic, which is why we even talked about the historical implications, right? Like how that restricting of access. So it is more than just a picture book. It is actually, we're thinking and talking about a civil rights issue, right? Um, because in America, we have access. We have access to freedom of speech. We have access to the freedom of the press. And so once you start to delve into this world, it actually, starts to invoke on people's rights as citizens. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, and so I shared this already, but I just shared again. Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop says, when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn a powerful lesson about how they are devalued in the society of which they are a part.
Okay.
You can go ahead, Khai.
Okay. So I did a little bit of research at my school and how our ELA grade is, and I'm just going to talk a little bit on that. So part of my ELA grade at school is based on the number of books I read using a point system developed by Accelerated Reader, which I'll be calling AR. Depending on the book you read, the number of points you can earn can range from as little as half a point to as high as 115 points. For example, a book like Stamps for Kids is only 3 points, and the adult version is only 6, even when both stamp books are on historical and important things that happen and that are still happening, while a book like Twilight is 18. So you can notice that huge gap in between a book like Stamped and the other and the adult version and in the children's version from a book like Twilight, even though they are on completely different topics. One is way more important than the other, which is the Stamped book, of course, because it always is good to read nonfiction things as well as fiction things, but you do not want to always mark those so low. So, on my next slide, if you take a look at these books, you can always put your thoughts in the chat. I love that. Um, you can see that books like Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison are marked lower than books like Harry Potter and The Goblet of Fire. Now take a look at Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky and The Hunger Games. If you were to look at these books without reading either of them, you'd probably think they're about the same size or maybe even closely related in story, but they aren't at all. First, Tristan Strong is 496 pages. The Hunger Games is 374, and that's a huge difference again. So, in my examples, between all four books, we can tell that many kids may choose to read a book with less pages, or it may have the same number of points in a book with more pages instead of a book with more pages, or books have more fantasy in their storylines instead of more it's so more fantasy than there are more like real things that you'd see in life. So, Invisible Man, for example, again, is a story that centers a black man who is living in a racist society. The story focuses on his experiences as not being seen because of his race. And this is a real social issue that people have faced. Now we'll watch a video with the authors of Stamped. So let me go ahead and start this up.
So yes, so they'll talk a little bit about the book, and we just want you to hear it since we've mentioned it a few times.
Many headlines refer to the stock market plunge yesterday as Black Monday, and that is just one of the subtle and not so subtle ways that racism has been braided into our everyday culture. CBS News contributor Ibram X. Kendi won a National Book Award for Stamped from the Beginning, the definitive history of racist ideas in America. And now he's teaming up with best-selling author Jason Reynolds to rework the book for a younger audience. Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, a remix of the National Book Award winning Stamped from the Beginning, is geared toward, long title, but is geared toward readers 12 and up. Kendi and Reynolds join us first on CBS This Morning. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Good morning.
So, Jason, you took his text and you say now it is not a work of history. It is a book about the present, about the here and now.
Absolutely.
Why position it in that way?
For a few reasons. I mean, number one, young people don't like to read history books. And so to ensure them that it's not a history book is sort of an okie doke, so to speak. But number two, because we do live on a continuum, right? All of our lives are affected by the things that have happened before us. Our present is a product of history. And so it's important for young people to understand this isn't just about what happened then. It's about what happens now and how our now is affected by what happened.
Can I ask how you two, I love the two of you have paired up, and I'm curious how you met and got together.
We were both fortunate enough to be nominated for a National Book Award in 2016. Ibram won for Stamped from the Beginning. I was saying I lost to John Lewis, therefore I won as well.
This is every academic's dream. Like you write a book for the scholarly community, and then it gets its readership and it wins its awards, and then he comes along and he says, "Let me help you reach a real."
That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
What happened? How'd it go down?
I mean, actually, I've asked him multiple times, and he said no.
I said,
why? Why did you finally say yes?
Well, I'll say why I said no is because I have an awful lot of respect for Dr. Kendi and for the work that he's done. This is his life's work. This is his sort of vocation, and I'm careful about tampering with things that I believe are sacred. And I just was kind of like, that's it's done, right? And he pressed on, and I said yes because at some point I realized that this work is bigger than the both of us, and that it's not about either one of us, and it'll be left when we're gone.
And speaking of the book, so many misconceptions and truly lies throughout the history of what children are taught about their history. I hate to put it that directly, but you know, when you go back and you look at people like Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, these founding fathers who are so revered, how do you reteach that?
Well, I think first and foremost, you asked the question, what does it mean that a slaveholder heralded the American philosophy of freedom? And so you sort of start there. And then I think young people can understand the contradictions. And I think that's one of the things we're trying to sort of show them through this book. And then what we also can do is, like with fathers in general, most fathers and mothers want to teach their children to not make the same mistakes that they did, but they have to be honest about those mistakes. And we're honest in this book.
You say we have to teach these historical figures as people, not as deities, in effect.
Right.
Precisely. And they're people with contradictions. They're people who express both racist and anti-racist ideas. We have to point out what both types of ideas are so we don't replicate those racist ideas.
You know, there are people.
Okay.
That was just, we want to center that because it is complicated, right? We want for our children to have many opportunities to experience that representation piece, right? But we also want for them to have multiple perspectives. We saw some of those images a few slides ago, and I think the images really represent how kids might be feeling internally when they don't see themselves or their histories portrayed accurately, right? Or if they just don't see it at all. So it speaks volumes. So we want to give opportunities for students to read all kinds of things, historical pieces, even fantasy, right? We want for them to read those fantasy books. But I think what Khai is suggesting is that when we unintentionally, programs like AR unintentionally positions or values or privileges one kind of book or one type of author or one kind of writing, right? More so than another, we're teaching kids a lesson through that. We're teaching them this book is more meaningful, it's more powerful, it's more protected, right? It's more rewarded through points. So one of the things I want to ask Khai, if you can ask your teachers, right, when they think about their AR system, we know that has an algorithm. It's looking at the number of words, it's looking at the length of the sentences. What else should teachers be thinking about when they choose books, Khai?
I feel like when people choose books, teachers especially when they choose books, and they choose sites, when they should also see when a student does a book like that, because they can see when they take a test on it. They should do that, and then they should give them, I feel like, more points on those types of books. So then they can also say, not just read for the points, which I've heard many, many times. Lots of students that and my friends have said, yeah, I just read this book because it has more points than that one. And they don't really care about what's on the inside of the book. And I feel like that's what really matters. But goes into your head and what you think about. So I feel like teachers and being able to also look at what types of algorithms that they choose to show for like their for ELA and with reading and stuff, especially since that's like the core of all things in my opinion. It just helps to encourage the kids more, and in this instance it'd be giving more points. So they also, because that's a very deep book, and I feel like books like that and other books that show different perspectives, like it just helps encourage the students to read more books like that instead of always just reading one type of book, because it gives you more points than another book would.
Absolutely. So you're talking about context. Thank you. Go ahead.
Khai, I was going to say that there's been a lot of commentary in the chat about the great research that you've done and the analysis with, looking at the point system. And I'm thinking you might, I think people are encouraging you to write a proposal for your school. So, so if you want to think about that, I'm just throwing it out there.
Beautiful. So now we just want to give a few, yes, thank you, Dr. Waters, content, context, and voice. Yes. We just want to give a few more ideas to educators about how to support kids and also how to rethink like these ideas around banning and restricting text. So if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
So what can educators do? First and foremost, those educators who are on the line tonight, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is one way to get involved like in organizations like the one we're in tonight with 313 Reads, MCTE. I know MCTE is also represented this evening. That stands for Michigan Council Teachers of English. Michigan Reading Association, the Michigan Library Association, right? Like all of these associations are really, really advocates for literacy. And so being in community with folks who are also advocates, I think also buoys us up and it supports us, right? If you are able to join Banned Books Week this year, it starts September 22nd. I'll be reading a banned book. Will you be reading a banned book, Khai?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. And Miss Candace, are you going to be reading a banned book?
Most definitely. I love that.
Okay. And to protect educators, because sometimes educators are fearful, right? So we really encourage you to know your school board's policy on book banning. We also know that school boards are really based on state legislation. They have to follow state legislation. So currently, we do not have state legislation that restricts access to books. So that's important to know. And actually, the Michigan Library Association is working on legislation currently to ban book bans, right? The anti book banning campaign. So that work is in process right now. So that's the work for educators. Work that parents can do would be attend your school board meetings, right? That is public knowledge. So you can know if other parents are challenging books. That's important to know. Know your state legislation. I just mentioned one. The Michigan Freedom to Read Act is being introduced into legislation. You also want to know, because as a parent, sometimes I have been concerned, is this book appropriate? Is it age appropriate for my child? So if you open up those book covers, or if you're Googling a book to purchase for your child, you can see what the recommended ages are. I would really look to that, because librarians and folks who do this work regularly, they have taken care to put these books in categories. They're kind of like movie ratings almost, right? So there are children's books. We saw lots of those this evening, those picture books. There are also the middle level books. Those are the books that Khai is mostly reading, right? And then there are young adult books. Young adult books start about age 14 through 18. And so you would want to know, right? Am I giving my third grader a young adult book? Because sometimes the covers might be a little bit deceiving. So not to restrict, but if you want to read alongside, right? If you feel like it's an important topic, that might be a book that you decide, okay, I want to partner read with my child. Or maybe I want my child to wait a little bit of time for this book, but not restrict it forever, right? And then there are some adult books that are written with children in mind, right? And last but not least, to parents, go ahead, read books with your teens and preteens. We know they try to hide, they're hiding from us now. Bring them back and read alongside with them. And Khai, what would be your advice to young people?
So, always know your rights and your, like mommy said before, your school board's policy on book banning. Join a youth organization like Youth Council and always read, because reading is it can lead you to many things. And but like my mom said before, always read stuff that if you would read it in front of your parents, then you should be able to, then you would read it by yourself. You should always try to read books like that, because that's what's important. Always keeping your mind safe from things that won't always be for you at that age, and don't like try to grow up too fast with your books and stuff. But always keep reading.
We have one last cameo from our youngest Shahid. If you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Kareem also has some final words of wisdom.
Hi, Kareem. What are you reading?
Dogman Book 12.
Dogman Book 12. Did you know that Dogman was banned?
I never knew that.
But can I say
Well-
something first?
Well, I think banning books is wrong. Well, I think it's wrong because one parent can tell their kid not to read a book, but one parent can tell a whole school not to read it.
I agree, Kareem.
So I think reading is good for you. Because in some books there are words you might not know, and they might not know, and you can learn new words from them.
Learn new words and fall in love with books, right? Stories.
Like I did. I love the series Dogman. It's a really great series. You could try my series out too, or you could find your own series. But I do think banning books is wrong.
Okay. Thank you, Kareem. What do you want to tell everybody to keep doing?
Keep on reading. make sure and hopefully you find a book you love like I did.
Okay. I love all the comments. Those are so cute.
So that's it. Just like Kareem said, find a book that you can fall in love with. And one last piece of advice to parents. If you want to really get your kids engaged in reading, find book series that they love. That is normally almost a guaranteed way to keep them reading.
Wow, this was awesome. I and there's so much love in the chat. Oh my goodness. Um we thank you both so much for the wealth of information and perspective. I do want to take a couple moments just to see if there are any questions that anyone has for Dr. Shahid and for Khai. I'm trying to get all of these comments that are rolling in. But if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat and we will lift those in case there's any other things that are just got you guys itching out there before we go. We want you to be able to raise any questions or thoughts that you have. This was so helpful. Glad I was here to see this. And I agree. I love that that you both gave us information that's helpful for us as educators, right? For all of our educators out there, but also parents and even students. And so the information we got tonight is truly helpful for so many in our audience. Let's see. This question is for everyone. What's your absolute favorite book or text? I like that's a great question.
Yeah.
That is a good one. That's hard. I have so many. I want to name a couple if I can.
Yeah.
In terms of professional books, like right now I am reading, I shared that earlier. I actually read it and I'm listening to it. It's called Fugitive Pedagogy. And it is just such a beautiful, thought-provoking text. And so really it centers Dr. Woodson's life and how he was an activist. And so what it shows is that Black teachers who were working in predominantly white spaces or under the guise of, you know, working within systems that didn't necessarily nurture our children, right? They had to take a fugitive, right, approach to teaching. And so even though the book is telling stories that happened in the 1930s, 1940s, it is just so many parallels that we can learn from. It's just really inspiring, right? So that would be the book I point to for a professional text that I'm reading right now. In terms of children's books, oh God, that one is hard. Let me take a look.
And while you're
Yeah,
looking,
go
there's
ahead.
someone who commented and said, so Ray Irby said Kiera's favorites are The Skin I'm In and Copper Sun and the March series.
Oh yeah, see, those are all good. Oh my goodness. I'm going to point to the Schomburg. This is one of the books here. This is called Schomburg, The Man Who Built a Library. I believe it's also banned, unfortunately. But it tells the life of Arturo Schomburg and just how he collected Black art, Black books. And now, because of all those things that he collected, we now have the Schomburg Center in New York City that I know a lot of the researchers on the line tonight actually visited to do some of their research because it's the largest repository of Black archives in our country.
Wow.
So this is the story of his life. So I'll center that since we've been talking about history this evening.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Khai, what about you? Your favorite, all-time favorite book?
Whew, that's a hard choice for me too. So I've been thinking. But I also really did like the March series, along with the Tristan Strong book, which I mentioned earlier. I really did like that one. That was a good one. And I was going to say, oh yeah, there's another book. I haven't finished it yet, but I was reading it last year. It was based off of a girl in Africa. And it was like, I forgot what it was called, but she had a skin disease, or something like that. But it was her life in Africa and how she ended up like becoming a superhero or something. It was a really good book, but I've read of it, and I really like that one as well. So
that's really great. One of my favorite books is Nelson Mandela's autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom. And so, I actually had a teacher, a high school teacher, who was also one of my track coaches. He gifted that book to me when I was graduating from high school. He is South African himself, Mr. Fisher, Mr. Rodney Fisher, shout out. And I'm so thankful that he gave me that book because I just loved it. And it became one of my favorites, and it encouraged me to actually travel to South Africa, which I did my junior year in college. I did a study abroad program in South Africa. I lived there for 3 months and learned so much about Nelson Mandela's work and just the governmental changes there in South Africa. So just to show how an educator passing on literature to their student can inspire so much in a student. Someone said, I just purchased the picture book Jimmy's Rhythm and Blues, The Extraordinary Life of James Baldwin. That's great. We've got some resources coming in here. And I do want to, I'm going to highlight, and I don't know how clickable this link is for you guys, but I want to highlight this resource that Khai and Dr. Shahid have provided. Access using this link. I believe it's a link to, is this a link to you guys' slides or to resources that you guys have provided?
It is a link to resources, and we'll continue to add to that resource list. And it is curated for educators, much like tonight's presentation, parents, and youth.
Perfect. So we will send this link out through email to everyone who registered. So if you didn't register, you can still do that so that you can receive this follow-up email. We thank you so much. I see someone in the chat, and we've had, so many thanks to you all throughout this evening. Khai, Dr. Shahid, you have really given us so much information and so many great tools to work with. We thank you to our audience who you've been so engaged and interactive this evening. And so we appreciate you all. I want to just hope that everyone and wish everyone a great weekend. We've got more comments coming in, and please feel free to reach out to Khai and Dr. Shahid and Kareem, because he is obviously an advocate to their whole family. If you have more questions, we appreciate you all. Any last words before we sign off?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to 313 Reads, the beautiful youth council that Kai is a part of it. I'm a proud parent of a youth council member. So I would say this is another opportunity to raise the voices of young people, to get them involved in organizations like this. Thank you to the parents and the educators on the line tonight. We really appreciate you. It's a Friday night, and here you are. We thank you.
Yes. Khai, any last words?
Yeah, I just wanted to also thank the audience one last time and just remind them to always keep reading, just like Kareem said.
Awesome. Yes. And I'll close it out by Also giving a thank you and a shout out to 313 Reads Executive Director, Dr. Leah Van Bell. We are thankful for her vision and leadership. And we just encourage you all to go out there and read, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.